Today we're joined by Bernie Kay from South Shore Academy, Becky Jones from St Mary's Catholic Academy, and Karen Lewis from Educational Diversity. Welcome to the three of you. I'm just going to talk briefly about their past careers and then about the talk that they're going to give. So Bernie's an assistant head teacher at South Shore. She's in charge of literacy and early career teacher development. She's been teaching English for over 15 years. And she's an all-round reader. She's committed to improving educational outcomes for those in challenging communities. We've then got Becky Jones. She's in her 12th year at St Mary's Catholic Academy, and she's the assistant head teacher there, responsible for teaching, assessment and learning. As part of Blackpool's Key Stage 3 literacy project, she's implemented an innovative reading programme across the academy, embedding reading time into every school day. And then we've got Karen Lewis from Educational Diversity. She's got more than 22 years of experience in education and worked with a range of students, including those who present with challenging behaviours and SEND. She moved from a mainstream setting in 2002 to work at Educational Diversity, which is the biggest PRU in the country. And she's worked tirelessly to improve outcomes for students ever since. Her work's involved improving literacy skills, particularly for disadvantaged students, and it's been a passion of hers for many years, and she's been a driving force in developing this area across the PRU. So the workshop this afternoon will explore the vision for the Blackpool Key Stage 3 literacy project and its implementation across these three schools in the town. Bernie, Becky and Karen will give an insight into how GL Assessment's Progress Series, NGRT and PASS were used to baseline and monitor the progress of the project at both school and town level. The workshop will also provide an overview of the literacy interventions implemented in different school settings and the wider impact of the project on school culture, staff and pupil attitudes towards reading, staff knowledge and understanding related to literacy and town-wide school link development. And we must also mention the other 6 schools who've been involved in Blackpool that Bernie, Becky and Karen are representing today. So Bernie, Becky, Karen, welcome. Really appreciate your time today. I know how busy you are and under pressure at this particular time. So for you to spend an hour to talk to us and explain what you've been doing, we're really grateful. So I'm going to start and hand over to Becky.
Thank you, Darren. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for coming along. Myself, Bernie and Karen, as Darren has said, we do represent 3 of the schools that have been involved in Blackpool's Key Stage 3 literacy project. This project is now in its 3rd year, and all 3 of us and all 3 of our schools have been involved from the start of the project. So when we set out on this journey 3 years ago, the key idea was to try and find ways to remove literacy barriers for young people across the town. The sorts of literacy barriers that our students experience quite often are complex ones, and so we have worked collaboratively over the past 3 years to try and remove some of those barriers for our young people. So the project has three main strands. The first being reading, the second being vocabulary development, and the third being the associated professional development for the staff across the schools. And this has very much been a town-wide approach. The project has involved all the Blackpool secondary schools, including the pupil referral unit, and as part of the project funding, a senior leader had released time from other responsibilities in school to represent the school at the project, and then to go back into school to implement the project. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how we've implemented the project in our own setting, but we're also going to draw on the collaborative nature of the project, because it very much has been an opportunity to learn from one another. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how St Mary's have implemented the Key Stage 3 literacy project. St Mary's is an 11 to 18 mainstream school. In Blackpool, we have approximately 1,100 pupils on our roll, and like lots of the other schools in the town, we do experience that coastal challenge, in the sense that for many of our young people, they live in areas where there are high levels of deprivation. So we were very, very keen to get involved in the Key Stage 3 literacy project. In our CEF process, sort of year on year, a key theme that was running through that was around our students' ability to access things like exam papers, to be able to read, to understand, to interpret what was being asked of them. We felt that literacy, in particular reading, was a barrier to their success. So we were really keen to get on board with this project. And what this project has done is it has allowed us the resources, the time and the expert partners to really work on reading, vocabulary development, and also the professional development of our staff. And throughout the project, we have been using the GL suite, so progress test series, the NGRT, the PASS, to baseline, but also to measure the impact of our work. So at St Mary's, when we started the baseline testing using those GL tests that I've just spoken about, what we found was that Key Stage 3, our students, certainly in terms of our NGRT data, it was telling us that our students were broadly in line with the national average. The mean standard age score fell within that region. So the piece of work that we have done at St Mary's has been around encouraging reading, providing time for reading, but also providing challenge with reading. So our approach has been quite a universal offer in terms of what we have implemented across Key Stage 3. And I know that Bernie and Karen are going to go on to speak in a little bit more detail about sort of interventions and then slightly more sort of bespoke offer. But I'm going to focus on the universal offer here at St Mary's. So it has been sort of threefold, really. The first part has been in implementing a reading programme that we call St Mary's Literary Canon. We also use a Bedrock vocabulary programme as part of our home learning package, and we also deliver lexonic intervention, which I know Bernie's going to talk about a little bit later. So there's been many strands to our work, but our biggest piece of work certainly was in putting together and implementing our literary canon. So what we hoped was that we could find a time in the day for all our students to engage with reading. Many of them didn't read at home, and many of them still don't read at home. So we wanted to make sure that there was time within the school day for that to happen. So at the start of this project, we made a significant change to our school day, and we put 30 minutes of time in for reading each day. And once we'd made that change, we then started to think about the sorts of things we wanted our students to read. We wanted our texts, the text that we chose, to be challenging. We wanted, our students to read things, different genres, different themes, different cultures, different eras. We wanted them to have an experience of reading books that they wouldn't necessarily choose for themselves. And hopefully you can see there on the screen the selection of books that we chose for students in our year 7. And the menu obviously looks different for year 8 and for year 9. So throughout this, staff development has been key, and I will talk a little bit more about that later. But the way that our reading time is set up is that for 30 minutes a day, students read with their form group and their form tutor. So everybody in school, all teaching staff are form tutors. So, whichever subject you teach, you're a form tutor, and therefore you're involved in delivering a delivery of reading time. And our form groups are mixed ability groups. So that's how it runs, really. We obviously wanted to make sure that everything was made as simple and straightforward as possible, that our staff felt supported with it. So hopefully another picture that you can see there are the sort of the boxes of books with all our canon texts in. And one of the things that we did at the start of this was we appointed a book lead. So there was a person in school who became sort of the in-house experts on each of the books in our canon, and they resourced them. So we produced knowledge organisers for both the staff and the students, obviously slightly different versions for the staff. They got sort of a chapter by chapter breakdown. For the students, there were sort of the key vocabularies included, characters, relationships between characters. So there were plenty of resources to support staff in delivering this. And as part of that book lead role, that member of staff also led CPD for the teachers who were delivering that text with their form group. So there was an opportunity to sort of to come together to read the book in advance, to discuss it, and so that really helped in terms of boosting our staff's confidence with this. We also developed some common reading strategies. So we explored things like teacher-led reading, student-led reading, paired reading, what we call table reading or reading in a group of 4. So we had some sort of agreed strategies that we used to read during reading time. Again, that made things a little bit more straightforward for staff. So logistically, we tried to make it as straightforward as possible, and we tried to offer support to our staff so that they felt confident with the programme. So what I'll also say is that this is the canon for the vast majority of our students, but we do also have an alternative canon for some of our weakest readers. So that is important. Obviously, this was a big change to our school day. We had buy-in from our head teacher, from our CEO, from our from SLT, and this was a real key priority for us in the first year of this project, and it continues to be, because it has been a very powerful intervention for us here at St Mary's. It certainly hasn't been without challenges. So one of the first challenges we experienced was the delivery of thousands of books and where we put them. That it's certainly not to be underestimated. For some staff, their levels of confidence with reading themselves, we had to support them with that. We didn't get the calendar in right in the first year, so we hadn't allowed the right time for some of the books. That's something that we've been able to sort of to improve year on year. But ultimately, it has been part of a wider approach across school to improve reading and literacy. So alongside the reading time and the canon, we also have delivered a CPD programme to our staff, where we have focused on things like tiers of vocabulary, the pre-teaching of vocabulary. We'd done a piece of work already on knowledge organisers. So once we'd done this word tier training, we were able to go back and to review some of that work to make sure that we got that right. And we've also worked on sort of explicit vocabulary instruction and looked at things like the Freya model and the SEEK principles that I know Alex quickly talks about. So selecting vocabulary, explaining it, exploring it, consolidating it. So that has been part of this sort of literacy package that we have offered to our staff. Alongside that, we were supporting with the training of with the literary canon, and in our first year of this project we had 14 hours of staff CPD time. We are very lucky to have 2 hours of CPD every week at St Mary's, so there was sort of 14 hours in that first year to provide the wraparound support, so that we could look at things like the routines around reading time, so that we maximise time, the sorts of strategies that we use to read, and also an opportunity to sort of share in one another's practice, sharing films of different practitioners, and also allowing our staff the opportunity for peer observation to go and observe one another during reading time. Our work, our professional development work, has continued to progress, and we have started to work through the EEF guidance report around Key Stage 3 literacy, with a real focus on disciplinary literacy. And probably our biggest piece of work here has been around sort of reviewing schemes of learning, looking for opportunities for the use of text, thinking about text selection and actually, is it fit for purpose, is it suitable, is it accessible for students, what sorts of words need to be pre-taught, and so on. So it really has changed the way that staff approach reading, both in reading time in those 30 minutes, but also across the curriculum and across a range of subjects. And we sort of pulled that piece of work together by developing a series of subject-specific reading approaches. So each department in school has developed that. Interestingly, we went back to that when we moved into remote learning. You know, does it look different when students are reading from screen and so on? So that has been, again, and that has been an ongoing piece of work, and it continues to, we continue to work on that. And I thought this was important to include because things have been, you know, a little bit unusual for the past 12 months or so. But in that first year of this project, as I said, we baselined and we measured the impact at the end of year one, and you can see there the impact and the increase in the mean standard age scores across that first 12 months. And it was particularly significant, if you know, when you delve a bit deeper into the data, for our disadvantaged students in year 7. So you know, with all things COVID, it has been it has been more of a challenge, because we haven't got the control of having students here for 30 minutes to do the reading. Obviously we have now, which is great, but we will continue to implement the things that I've spoken about, to refine the approach, and obviously to use things like the NGRT to continue that evaluation. But before I do hand over to Bernie, for us here at St Mary's, this hasn't just been about data and numbers. This has been about our students being able to talk about reading books, to be able, you know, at the start of this project, if you were to speak to students in school about books they've read, authors they knew, the conversation would be limited. And now, in our third year of this, our students are able to talk about the books that they've read. For some of our students, it's been their first opportunity to read a full book, and sort of the success that they feel as a result of that is huge. So I just wanted to mention that alongside the pleasing data, we also have those real life student experiences where our students' cultural capital has grown significantly. So that's just a little bit of a taster of what we've been doing at St Mary's as part of this project. Over to you, Bernie.
Hi, so yeah, I'm from another school in Blackpool. I'm from a comprehensive school, mixed comprehensive school. We have 420 children on roll at the moment, and we have growing roll numbers. We have been a school that has kind of been in and out of special measures over the years, and I think that we have been on a real journey, and actually part of being on the Blackpool Literacy Project has been part of our journey. So 3 years ago, we baselined alongside all of the other Blackpool schools, all of our students, and I think perhaps aside of the pupil referral unit in Blackpool, we probably had the worst results across the whole of the town in terms of our reading age data. And I remember kind of receiving these results in a public platform, and I remember the gasps of shock across the room as my school's data was shown. So we revealed that kind of a third of our school, a third of every single year group, were in the lowest stay nines for their reading. You can see on the screen now just how many students that kind of implicated, and it really is a third of our year group in every single year that kind of fall into these really challenging brackets. And like Becky alluded earlier, it's not just a reading difficulty. Quite often our students have multiple difficulties accessing their learning, but so we've had to kind of implement some quite different approaches. We also have a literary canon, and we decided as a senior leadership team quite early on that we were going to have to make some radical changes, not just to our school day to include a literary canon time, but actually we're going to have to make some really significant curriculum changes so that we were prioritising literacy. We knew early on that we were going to have to take some kind of approaches to intervention, some kind of interventions that were going to have significant impact on our learners. But we also knew that our universal offer needed to be good as well, because we didn't want to forget those in the middle and those at the top end. So although we have got a literary canon in place, we've done some quite different things in terms of intervention, and that's what I'd like to talk about today. So at the beginning of this process, actually this year, the first year of the project, we had not assessed reading ages across our whole school. We tended to go off Key Stage 2 data, so that was a real gap in terms of our assessment. And I do feel that we only really got to grips with the barriers when we did this baseline. And we realised quite early on that we had huge gaps in terms of CPD on how to kind of tackle this data. We had, you know, quite an inexperienced staff, with high numbers of early career teachers that would need some significant training if we were going to kind of make any kind of difference with this data. So very early on, and actually still to this year, we wanted to work on word depth knowledge and explicit vocabulary instruction across all faculties. Our priorities 3 years ago actually haven't changed so much, in that we are still looking at developing reading for pleasure and progress, and we're still encouraging academic reading in all subjects. Now, when I say that they haven't changed, I think I've come to realise as a school leader that actually this problem probably won't ever go away, and they should always be a priority for schools, or certainly schools in my context. So GL assessment for us was a really useful tool, firstly because it enabled us to baseline any kind of the students upon entry. We baseline at the beginning of the year, and we also retest at the end of the year, which is quite helpful to us to kind of capture incremental gains. We also really use the GL data to make sure that we're identifying suitable interventions, and we're measuring the impact of those interventions, and also, I suppose, justifying the money spent, because we have spent an awful lot of money on time and resources to make this a priority. I would say that all our staff are really used to now understanding what the NGRT data gives us, not just in terms of a kind of standard age score, but what the kind of real intricacies of those pupil-based reports show us about students' barriers to learning. So, for example, our teachers are able to see whether it's a vocabulary problem or whether it's a comprehension issue. And those students at the lowest stay now, we do further investigation that we'll talk about later. So once we have students that are identified in the lowest stay nines, we then go on to a kind of spiral of inquiry. So we do use now the YARC test so that we can drill further into their barriers to learning. And we're also at the moment looking at the British Vocabulary Scale as well. We're using obviously this data to track impacts, and I think that's been really important for all stakeholders, not just students themselves, understanding how much their efforts are paying off, but also for our governors, for Ofsted, as a school that's kind of been looked at through an Ofsted lens for some time now. We've been able to show real impact in Key Stage 3, which has really helped us change the reputation of the school. We've also been able to provide standardised scores to all of our staff, and we've done considerable amount of training in terms of looking at pupils holistically through a lens of Key Stage 2 data, through the NGRT, through the CATs, and through the pupil attitude to self and school, so that we have a real information about the whole child. So just a little table here just to show you the suite of assessments we use to identify certain reading interventions. So we're not wholly looking just at the new group reading test, but interestingly, we use the CAT data as well to make informed decisions about intervention selection. And we have a small cohort of EAL in our school, but a complex one in that the cohort of EAL students arriving to us quite often do not have a good knowledge of their own first language, and they've been in and out of schools. And so we have had situations where we've had to teach students to read completely from scratch, students that haven't had any kind of experience of academic reading whatsoever. So we've used the BELLS assessment and the EAL assessment to inform those decisions as well. After the first year and kind of battling through that incredible data set, we decided that we needed to make some kind of significant change into our staffing structure. At the start of this project, there was just myself leading literacy, and we realised with such incredible barriers to literacy that we would need a team of people on board. So the way that we restaffed, there was myself having a kind of strategic understanding of interventions that were out there to bring in the most appropriate for our data set. Below me, I also have a reading intervention teaching leader that has a kind of in-classroom experience of delivering those interventions. She looks at kind of how they are operating on the ground floor, and she can make adjustments and things like that regarding how well they are implemented. So she gives us really solid information about how they're working, because we're really interested in the fidelity of these interventions and making sure that they're delivered in the way that they were intended and they're having the impact that they're needed. So she's got a really important CPD role in our school in a sense that she not only works with our high-level teaching assistants in terms of their CPD, but she's also got quite a brilliant coaching role for them as well, because after all, they are dealing with our most complex of students, so they need the support in order to deal with that. They're also having to grapple with a multitude of different interventions that we're running at the moment. So making sure that they're implemented in the way that they are intended, we did need that extra layer of support. We also had to employ a librarian, because at the start of this project, we didn't have a working library, and that's something that we knew that we had to work hard to set up, because we had to change the culture of the school, and that started with how students viewed books. So the way we organised our high-level teaching assistants is they all have been allocated to a year group and kind of responsible for their year group's data. So upon conducting an NGRT assessment of a year group, students are categorised at the start of the year into certain intervention groups, and the higher level teaching assistant is responsible for delivering those interventions and also kind of doing a pre and a post test assessment to make sure that students, if they're ready to go back into lessons and things like that, that is done in a meaningful and timely fashion. After all, we don't want our students out of lessons. That's the last thing that we do want. So we do aim to make sure that students have least amount of disruption from learning as possible. So as you can see, it's grown quite considerably from the first year where it was just myself to now having this literacy team of people, which has been a really important asset to our school. So I'm going to say that our students all receive intervention. We move from a universal offer. So like Becky has suggested, we are really focusing this year down on disciplinary literacy across all faculties. For example, a lot of our history and geography lessons are delivered through a kind of guided reading model, and all our staff have had training on reciprocal reading, and you can see those strategies as part of the quality first teaching framework within lessons. We also have a form time reading section of the day. We extended our form form time as well to accommodate this, and we felt that that was a necessary adjustment to our school day given our reading data. We now have library access and library lessons for all students, and we have been working on explicit instruction. The more targeted approach is that upon receiving the NGRT data, those right at the bottom of the kind of 69s, we interrogate that data. And for some students, we've created a package of precision teaching, and that means kind of exposing students to whole words that, and these are students that haven't really responded to phonics all throughout primary school. And when we've investigated if it's a phonics issue, it hasn't been. So they've been receiving interventions on high frequency words and that kind of regular exposure to those words. We've also added in Lexonic Core, which is a decoding intervention. It's a 6-week program, and it works on getting students unstuck. So it gives them a really detailed understanding of prefixes, suffixes, root words, so that students have that kind of mental resilience when they do meet a word. They can, they've got some tools in their toolkit to get themselves unstuck. Upon receiving students that have got significant issues with reading comprehension, and that's exposed through the NGRT report, we have created an intervention, which is a guided reading intervention, which really works on comprehension skills. So the aim of that is to work on summarisation, clarification, and all of those skills that are really important in reciprocal reading strategies. And for some students, I alluded to earlier, but namely our EAL cohort, we have the phonics-based intervention, which is called Lexonic Leap. That's based on 20 minutes a day, where students are visiting some of the high frequency phonetic sound chunks, and they're exposed to those regularly. We have taught students how to read from scratch using that intervention, and that's been a really important one for our school. And then, of course, explicit vocab instruction across school. And then some of our kind of one-to-one interventions, of course, include SEND support and speech and language and communication, which we've come to realise is fundamental even before we get to the reading, and nurture support. After we brought students back from COVID school closures, we realised quite early on that some of our most vulnerable students would need a much more kind of nurturing approach to their reading. So we implemented straight away, as part of our recovery curriculum, a paired reading approach. So some of our really, really vulnerable students still have access to 20 minutes paired reading with an adult. And we found that has been significant in raising attitudes and confidence for reading. So like Becky alluded to earlier today, yes, we do have a literary canon, and it is an ambitious literary canon. It is something that we've implemented upon that match our reading age data, but we also have an alternative one for an alternative canon for our most vulnerable students in nurture. And these tend to be Barrington Stoke books, which are kind of quick and easy reads, but high engagement. And we've had some really good success in that. And one thing I've found with nurture readers is that they need that kind of short text and that quick turnaround. And they've responded really well with that. So we have tracked data across the 3 years of our programme, and we've started with some significant issues in terms of our mean standard age score, but with, you know, a multitude of interventions and a universal approach, we've seen some really significant impact in years, and we're hoping to continue with this as the years go on. So moving beyond an intervention culture, which is something that I'm really keen to have my eye on in terms of a strategic lead, literacy will always be a core driver for our school. We 3 years ago decided to clear the decks in terms of all our drivers, and we decided to just focus on literacy in terms of teaching and learning, in terms of, you know, all of our appraisal targets and things like that. So it has been something that has been a difficult CPD requirement for our staff, but it's something that we've made real inroads with. But I don't think it's going to be disappearing overnight for our school. Staff who deal with the most vulnerable students have received the highest quality CPD. Our higher level teaching assistants, our teaching assistants that are dealing with these students day to day, it's really important that we've prioritised them. And literacy is at the heart of our teaching and learning package. We are continuing to assess students early and make sure that in-class intervention is a priority for us, and not kind of withdrawals, because we want that to be really important. So reciprocal read has been a fundamental intervention for us in class. And we're going to continue to work with middle level leaders to ensure that the curriculum is not only ambitious, but it's also promoting high quality and knowledge rich text, so that we're constantly exposing students to reading across the curriculum. Okay, handing over to Karen now.
Thank you, Bernie, really appreciate that. Our journey is very similar to both Bernie, Becky and all the schools in Blackpool, but we felt it was really important due to the nature of the students that we have, the level of disadvantaged, the speech language communication issues that we find. We have a mixed ability classes. We range from Key Stage 2 to 4. Our biggest cohort tends to be Key Stage 4, but we have a huge number of Year 9s, usually mainly boys as well. So it was really important that we were part of this right from the concept, because we felt it was morally right for our staff, our service, to do the best that we could by these students to improve their levels of literacy. We know for a long time that the correlation between low levels of literacy and behaviour was prevalent in most of the students that come our way, and so we knew it was imperative that we did more with regards to literacy than we'd done previously. So initially it was really, really important that SLT bought in to what we were trying to do, and Heather Smith, our deputy head, was absolutely instrumental and integral in making sure that that happened, because once we had it from the top, rather than Karen beating the drum for years and years about literacy, it was a whole school approach, and that enabled us to have staff buy-in, because without that we couldn't move forward. CPD was absolutely at the forefront of what we needed to do in order to take what we wanted to do further in the best to ensure outcomes for our students. The challenges within that is we have a small staff cohort, because at the moment we've got 196 students. That can go up to a maximum of 320 at some points. But the transients between students coming in and moving out and going to another school, going out of area and coming back, that's what we have to also allow for when we're dealing with students coming in and out of the service. And that's an issue as well when you're training staff, because we could have, you know, at some points a lot of supply and staff turnover. So it was ensuring that everybody was on the same page right from the word go. And it was changing that whole culture to ensure that our students were receiving the best quality that you would get in any mainstream school. You look at what Bernie's done and what Becky's done and what all the schools have done. We wanted to make sure we were also instilling that level of quality in our teaching and learning, in our CPD, and therefore leading to positive outcomes for our students. So we had to be pragmatic, like Bernie said. When we saw the outcomes, we weren't surprised, but to see it there, hit you in the face, really, that was quite a stark reality for us. I mean, when you think that 48% of our students were in the lower 2 stay nines, and it's supposed to be around 11% nationally, so we were well below the national average. But we understood that we had a long way to go, and we understood why our students were in those lower stay nines. We also include stay 9-3 for our students, because they are our biggest cohort, 72% initially when we first started this. We worked so hard over lockdown with remote learning, including reading and everything that we did. We didn't necessarily go for the literary canon, the same as the schools have done, because we've started to change the culture while we change the timetable. So we have form time reading, the same as the schools do, and we introduced accelerated reader across all staff and for all students. And we had a culture where you could walk down the corridor any afternoon when it was form time, and you could look through any window and you had whole groups of students reading. And in terms of people's preconceptions about what they imagine a PRU might be like, I mean, that was phenomenal for our staff, for our students. And it didn't happen overnight, it happened over time. And now we are at a place where the culture has changed and we have had that shift. This year, when we did our recent GL assessments at the beginning of this year, we were expecting dire results because of the lockdown. However, 38% of our students were in Stay 9 1 and 2, 52% if we included the Stay 9 3s, and for the first time ever, we actually had students moving to Stay 9 7 and 8, which was unheard of previously. So all that hard work, all that persistence, all that changing culture, that diet that we were providing for the students and the staff buy-in really started to have an impact in spite of everything that was happening, in spite of lockdown and the reality of living under a pandemic. Because of the rigorous way we use GLs, and I'll come on to that in a second, we could show that in spite of everything, that progress was still being made. Sometimes it was a couple of months, sometimes it was up to 2 years, but that was phenomenal progress for our students, for our staff to see, and for us as a service. Thanks, Bernie. What we also needed to do is look at consistency and fidelity. So we already had the GL suite of assessments, not to the level that we have now, but we started to use them. And what we found is when we first started to use them is students were doing what students do and clicking, and weren't really taking it seriously. And so our data wasn't as robust as it could have been. So what we did is ensure that staff really were trained to understand the importance of rigorous, accurate baseline assessments and the impact that has for future interventions, for future support for our students, for further diagnostic testing. And people really began to understand that it's okay if students find it difficult and have behaviour issues, we come back to it another day, but we make sure that when we come back to it, it is absolutely consistent with fidelity and robust, so that information and that data really informs us as to our next steps. What was also important is the way that GL transformed our whole assessment process. It transformed our perceptions of assessment, it transformed our use of assessment, and it totally transformed the what now, the what next, and the way we use detail analysis. So we do use the headlines, the Stay 9 1 and 2, the standard age scores, reading ages, etc., etc. But what we also do with the GLs is we go into that finite information. So further down on the GL reports, there are many areas where it talks about grammar, punctuation, it breaks it down into narrative, non-narrative, it then goes on the progress test specifically, looking at inferences, complex, simple inferences. And what we did with some of our staff was I got together some of our recently qualified teachers and our NQTs, because as you can imagine, people were sick of hearing me talk about literacy and what we had to do for the fight for literacy. So really bringing the RQTs on board, who were PE by the way, and asking them to really look at the students in their groups and really drill down into these GL reports and look at not just the Stay 9s and the standard age scores, but what else those reports, the level of data and information that they contain, and how we can use that. Because in the first year, some of our students didn't increase the Stay 9, didn't increase the standard age score, didn't really increase the reading ages. But what we had done is worked on areas, for example, complex inference and simple inference, and spelling, punctuation and grammar. And within the report the following year of the first year, we saw huge increases. I mean, one of them went from 28% to 42% in the grammar and punctuation. and in the simple inference went from 17% up to almost a national average of 48%. Now the standard 8 score and the stay 9, that stayed the same. But for that student to make those huge groups jumps in progress within their group due to those little micro interventions was huge, and it was really significant for us to show finite levels of progress, because for some of our students they take, as you can imagine, dips, troughs, highs, lows, ups and downs. We don't see them, we do see them. So those sorts of little measures of progress were absolutely instrumental in continuing that buy-in and that level of progress and moving forwards continuously for us as a service. And when I use these staff to, I force them to do an inset, and for other staff to see that these PE teachers who were our QTs were coming out with this level of data and could explain the little processes that we put in place to make that progress, that had a real impact on staff, because it was somebody who they could relate to, who was showing them that actually GL, what it can provide, the level of information and in-depth knowledge that you can gain around the students is absolutely imperative and vital. There's also the implications for teaching and learning. We have ILPs and we transfer that information onto ILPs so that literacy is embedded across everything that we do for these students. We have an A to Z, any staff member can go into the A to Z and they can find the teaching and learning implications that are on an ILP for each student and use that for literacy across the curriculum. So it's not, the culture change that we also had was it's not an English subject specific, it's our fault. Literacy was all about English. That was a whole culture change as well. Everybody is now fully aware that literacy is a whole school priority. It is the responsibility and the moral responsibility for every single member of staff, from an SSA upwards, to be doing everything that they possibly can to show these students higher levels of literacy, to ensure that everything that we have done, everything that we continue to do, everything that's embedded across as we move forward is all related to literacy. It's also really important to appreciate that this level of detailed analysis didn't happen overnight either. This is an ongoing staff involvement, staff training and staff development situation that Heather is also our deputy head, absolutely phenomenal with CPD and having bespoke levels of CPD depending on what staff need, including the supply moving out and new supply coming in, and ensuring that those staff also are fully aware of where we are with our students and what we do to support literacy across the board. We really focus heavily on PASS. So the PASS data shows us the students' attitudes, not only to school and work and themselves, and teachers, and it gives us another level of in-depth analysis when we compare their PASS data to the NGRT or to their GL progress tests. And it tells us really where these students are at holistically, so that there's all sorts of levels of packages that we can put in place to support them. For example, you can see there that our EHCP students, it's a little bit misleading, there were only 3 of them at the time, but they had some real issues around mainly how they felt about themselves, how their attitudes to their work, their response to the curriculum. And so working with the SENCO and looking at those students, the following GL set of data for the year 10s was completely transformed for those students. They went from reds in the areas of 1, 2 and 3, which are feelings about school, perceived learning capabilities and self-regard as a learner, plus the last one, which is the response to curriculum, went to green because of the level of intervention. So it's a 2-pronged attack. We've got the literacy and then we link that to the PASS and attitudes to learning, and students' attitudes to themselves as well and how they perceive their learning, because for us it's integral. Also within that, we had some issues with our year 9 girls and our year 10 girls who struggle to with how they perceive themselves, how they access learning, how they perceived their response to the curriculum, and it was really quite low. Now overall, if you look at the left-hand scale, overall our school attitudes to everything apart from the response to curriculum, they were all green, so we were really surprised. And it turns out that the reason why the girls were struggling is that 20% of those girls were in Stay 9 1 and 2. 43% of the females were in Stay 9 1 and 2 and struggling in those areas. And for us, that was an eye-opener because we needed to put some packages in around those students. So the level of information that we get from the GL, the NGRT, the PASS, the progress test, that is all amalgamated and tracked very, very carefully. And we use that information to provide bespoke intervention and bespoke support for our students as they move forward to help them to make progress within the PRU. Thanks, Bernie. Could you just click to the next one for me, Bernie, as I can't?
There we go.
Thank you. Finally, I'll fly through this for you. What we realised is when we started this, we needed a systematic, strategic approach. It wasn't one more intervention, one more priority, one more new thing that will go away in about a year's time. We needed to make sure that this had longevity, that this was for the future and it was future proofed. And we learned very quickly that doing a few things really, really well, rather than lots of things, I won't say poorly, but not to the capacity that they could have been done, was absolutely integral to how we continue to move forward. Bernie says it quite a lot. At the time, we didn't know what we didn't know. And as we moved through this process, we realised as we continued on different interventions and different paths and trying many different things, actually we began to realise we didn't know a lot, but there were a lot of things that we continued to do much, much better because we realised what we didn't know when we started this whole process. And looking exactly into what we were doing, why we were doing it. If it didn't work, it's okay to stop doing it. Okay, it's really okay to stop doing it. And to understand and know that, because it didn't show the outcomes that you wanted, is every bit as valuable, we found, as something with fantastic outcomes, because we knew then we didn't have to keep doing something that wasn't working. And that was really integral to how we move forward. The EEF guidance was absolutely vital in what we were doing, and evidence-informed working. Previously we might have had, we've heard this is a fantastic intervention, 76% of students have done really well, but then it was looking behind the detail. 76% of 7 students might not have been that brilliant, but really understanding and looking at how the EEF work, their packages and the different guidance reports that come out constantly, that they became my Bible, and they became a service Bible, and how we moved forward when it came to evidence. And we don't do anything unless the evidence tells us that it's worth doing. So that became also instrumental. Pre-mortems, we learned this from Curie, were absolutely a game changer in how we approached what we did with staff. I don't know if anybody knows pre-mortem, but it's really ironing out all the things that could possibly go wrong. And it seemed quite a negative way to work initially. However, if we ironed out all the things that could possibly go wrong and everybody had their say of why it wouldn't work, and we came up with solutions, what we were left with was something that was more likely to succeed, because we'd already ironed out all the negativity and all the things that could go wrong and should go wrong. And then we were left with things that would really, really work and ended up really succeeding because staff were allowed to go through that process. And it changed the way we approached delivering something different and something new. The importance of analysis and evaluation. Without that, it is very, very difficult to make sure that you are doing the right things at the right time for the right students. And staff understanding, when I go back to the GL progress test, the infinite detail that are contained in those reports and the different levels of progress that you can make with the right micro interventions and the right support is every bit as valuable as, you know, a standard age score going up by 3 points for some of our students in particular. And we also know that because we evaluate and analyse very, very detailed and carefully, and we use that explicitly to inform what next. So what are you going to do with that information, and how are you going to inform staff and train staff and support the students to move to the next steps? So the GL suite really honed in and contained everything that we required as a service in one area of the suite. And that's why it was absolutely invaluable when we bought into GL, and we continue to buy into GL, because now we're in a completely different place than we were 3 years ago when we started this whole process. And every member of staff is aware now this is a whole school responsibility. It's never going to go away. It's not going to be Karen for the rest of her life just going on about literacy. You can hear the bubbles of staff talking on the corridor about reading and literacy and little things that it makes me smile, and it makes my heart leap for joy that these things are happening. And the students talking about some book that they read on the internet. You know, we talk about students who've never read a book in their life, the only sort of level of reading they might have done is on their mobile phones. And then finally, like Bernie was saying, it's sustainability. It really is. So building in our sustainability for our staff. We started off with 2, myself and Heather. We've moved on. We've now got the Senko involved, and we now have 4 champions with Lexonic Leap, Accelerated Reader, and some of the response to interventions that we got from Curie. And within that, we've got 14 other staff now trained to support these students with various interventions. And this is because we were brought into, from the beginning, the whole school and the whole Blackpool literacy strategy. And the collaboration, I have to say, that's come from that is outstanding, phenomenal. And I don't think I would have been in the position that I'm in if it wasn't for people like Bernie and Becky and the support that we provide for each other and making sure that we keep going regardless of everything. But I'm saying, if you're going to start this journey, you've got to buy in completely from the beginning. It has to be something that you want to change in a culture, and it has to have longevity, and you have to be passionate about what you want to do for literacy. And I think as Blackpool and as schools, that's what we became, and that's why we're in the position that we are today, I would say. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. What a way to finish our Festival of Reading. That was really passionate from all of you, and to hear all those approaches, although slightly different in each setting. You know, the consistency from that whole school project, whole town project working together, just brilliant to see. And yeah, I've been pleased to be part of it the last 3 years with you as well. Really appreciate your time this afternoon. We have gone past 4 o'clock, so we don't have enough time for questions in this session. But if anyone does want to ask any questions, please use our forum in the Hoover platform, and we can get in touch with Becky, Bernie and Karen to answer some of those questions. So I just want to finish off by saying a huge thanks, Bernie, Becky, Karen. Not going to keep you any longer because I'm sure you're all ready to finish for the day. You're working extremely hard at the moment. So thanks for giving up your time this afternoon. And I'm sure lots of people will find some benefits from listening to this recording. And for the people who attended today, they've got some key takeaways. So thank you so much indeed. And thanks everyone who's joined this afternoon. Please go on to our platform, the Hoover platform. You can see all the recordings from this session and all the previous ones from the last few weeks, and get access to those and share those with your colleagues. And thanks so much for joining all our sessions. Thank you very much.